9 Harsh Realities of Rewatching Yellowstone. Yellowstone is unquestionably one of the most significant releases of the 21st century in the Western genre. The show's sprawling story of rural Montana ranchers, set against the spectacular backdrop of North America's most famous national park, goes a long way to delivering on co-creator Taylor Sheridan's initial pitch of remaking The Godfather in a contemporary Western setting. Yet, it's far from perfect. In fact, Yellowstone is arguably the worst show in its own franchise, given the critical acclaim garnered by its beautifully rendered spin-off prequel series, 1883 and 1923. The main show might have more swagger about it, but there are plenty of bones to pick out of its occasionally wayward plotting and frequently uneven characterizations. The best episodes of Yellowstone are masterpieces of the neo-Western genre. On the flip side, the series delivers its fair share of cartoonish storylines, gratuitous scenes, and highly questionable perspectives on women and Native Americans. What's more, rewatching it draws our attention to some harsh realities within the story of the show that we might well have missed in previous viewings. The plot holes in Yellowstone are gaping. At its most engrossing, Yellowstone's plot is not just structurally sound but expertly crafted. On the other hand, there are moments in the series when major plot holes threaten to undermine its overall credibility. These plot holes are ultimately too many to count, but are laughably bad in the most glaring cases. Take the resurrection of Dan Jenkins following his apparent death in Yellowstone Season 1, for instance, or the unexploded bomb on the Beck brothers' plane that's never mentioned again. There's also the murder of reporter Sarah Nguyen by Jamie Dutton, which is conveniently ruled a kayaking accident without a proper explanation. The Duttons manage to forget that they have dinosaur bones buried on ranch land, too, and Rip Wheeler is somehow able to get married and to drive across state lines repeatedly without there being any documented record of his existence. Meanwhile, entire character arcs disappear without warning in later seasons of Yellowstone, as we'll return to below. Most of the Dutton family should be in prison. Kevin Costner has suggested that Yellowstone's central family should all be in prison, and when you rewatch the show, it's hard to disagree with him. The notorious train station, full of bodies belonging to those who get on the wrong side of Costner's character John Dutton, speaks for itself. During the course of Yellowstone, Dutton, his ruthless right hand, Rip, his adoptive son Jamie, and his son and daughter, Kayce and Beth, all commit multiple murders. The Dutton family is responsible for dozens of killings throughout the series, in addition to their corrupt relationship with the local Montana police force and numerous seemingly illicit financial dealings. Rip Wheeler's brutality is too much. No one directly perpetrates more violent crimes in Yellowstone than John Dutton's henchman, Rip, who later marries Beth Dutton. Between lynching Dan Jenkins, gouging a chunk out of Wade Morrow, and setting a rattlesnake on an unsuspecting Rourke Morris, Rip earns a fearsome reputation as the Dutton Ranch's most merciless enforcer. A large proportion of Yellowstone's darkest moments can be attributed to the character, whose profoundly tragic backstory, care and affection for Beth, and loyalty towards his father-in-law contrast starkly to the cruelty he exacts on almost everyone else. At its worst, Rip's brutal violence is too much for us to handle. Some of the show's best characters are underused. While figures like Rip Wheeler and Beth Dutton increasingly play leading roles in the series as it goes on, some of Yellowstone's best characters are noticeably underused in later seasons. Most notable among these characters is Kayce Dutton's wife, Monica, whose character development grinds to a standstill between seasons 3 and 5 of the show. Monica's work as a teacher, first at a school on her family's Broken Rock reservation and then at the local university, completely disappears from view after Yellowstone Season 2. Following the Season 3 episode, I Killed a Man Today, she doesn't have any storyline independent of her husband, Kayce. Another character notable by his absence from the subplots of later Yellowstone seasons is Gator, the Dutton family's live-in chef. This lovable fan-favorite character is even missing from scenes where his presence is required for the continuity of the series, such as John Dutton's funeral in Season 5. Yellowstone's treatment of female characters is problematic. Monica Long Dutton being underused in Yellowstone is the very least of the show's problematic portrayals of women. Even when Monica does appear in later seasons, she's either objectified, as bait for a serial killer, for example, or cast primarily in the role of a child-bearer for the Dutton lineage. The entire series is rife with this kind of latent misogyny, from the decision to have Beth Dutton force a jewelry store proprietor to strip as an act of vengeance, to the gratuitously staged attempted rape of Beth herself by a masked assailant. Yellowstone features admirably strong female characters, but the way it treats them is often cause for concern. Kayce is the only Dutton who cares about Native American rights. Yellowstone has faced criticism from actor Lily Gladstone about its representation of Native Americans, and her comments certainly tally with the Dutton family's attitude towards those living in poverty across the land boundary from them on the Broken Rock Reservation. The show's first episode, Gun Battle, perfectly encapsulates the sentiments of John Dutton towards his indigenous neighbors. Even when he forms an alliance with Chief Rainwater, it's a defensive action against a common enemy. To the bitter end, Dutton is determined to hold onto his ranch's land, despite it being promised to Rainwater's tribe as far back as the 19th century. The Dutton children and ranch hands have no real concern for Native Americans, either. The only exception is Kayce Dutton, whose sympathies are sometimes split between his wife, Monica, and his own family. It's Kayce who eventually sells the ranch land to Rainwater. But even he only does so out of necessity, with no other inheritance left to him by his father and Yellowstone not turning a profit. Yellowstone never recovers from John Dutton's death. After Kevin Costner's exit midway through Season 5, Yellowstone's divisive handling of John Dutton's death began its unceremonious crawl to the final episode. Although Beth and Jamie Dutton's fight to the death delivers a climactic finale, the show just isn't the same without its central patriarch. The second half of Season 5 is relatively muted, while Bella Hadid's controversial cameo in Yellowstone's penultimate episode seems to be more in service of co-creator and writer Taylor Sheridan than the series itself. Unfortunately for Sheridan, his show's lead character dying hours before the end of the story doesn't quite work out like it does in The Godfather. John Dutton is actually the show's main villain. Although the series has plenty of sinister antagonists, none of their crimes ultimately compare to the cumulative evil wrought by its central character. John Dutton is Yellowstone's real villain, whose obsession with his unprofitable ranch leads him to commit murder on a massive scale, at the same time as roping his entire family and various underlings into this violent undertaking.